Well, the typical research flow is, let's say you do have a question about a specific topic, like black holes,
Mhm.
and let's say you have no idea what they are. Well, I mean, in theory, you should know what black holes are if you have a research question about it, but let's say you don't know. Normally what the first step is just to.
Hello, dear friends. The following is, I'm just kidding. That's Lex Fridman's thing. I'm not going to copy. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Amy Tai this week, who is an applied scientist too at Microsoft, as well as a candidate for a Master's of Engineering in the University of Waterloo. Amy researches, her field of research is medical imaging, and she researches under the supervision of Dr. Alex Wong in the Vision and Image Processing Lab at the University of Waterloo. It was a true honor, as Amy is one of the most highly intelligent and talented people I know, and it was I cannot believe that she made the time to sit with me this week because her thesis deadline is coming up. It was honestly a great privilege, and I really hope that you gather as much insight out of this interview as I did. So, without further ado. Hello, Amy. Thank you so much for joining me today. It is March 17th, and I can't wait to talk to you. Let's jump into your career journey. How'd you land your first co-op? Take us back, because I saw on your experience, correct me if I'm wrong, but you started more in software development and you kind of transitioned into data science in your first co-ops, your very first ones, right?
My very first ones were actually in accounting, so they weren't
Oh,
even.
okay.
They were accounting positions at Pepsi, and I guess how I landed on them was first year I kind of leveraged what I did during high school. So that was a lot of like the DECA club. I did a lot of like accounting classes back in high school, so I leveraged those because I wasn't sure when I started university whether or not I wanted to be an accountant or do engineering or whatever. So I took that as an opportunity to explore the field. So I applied to some accounting jobs and some software jobs and a bunch of variety of jobs that I felt like I was qualified for.
That's super cool. But how did you decide that accounting wasn't for you? What was the transition like? Because your next co-op, I believe, I pulled up your LinkedIn, by the way. So your first one kind of in tech was at Honeywell doing software engineering, correct?
Yeah, so I did Pepsi twice. So I did the first one, it was more accounting driven, but it was also a lot of like data analysis driven. And then when I went back, I was able to explore more kind of the project management. I was managing a variety of projects in tech in general, like upgrading software and such. So that was really, really cool. But I really wanted to try also explore software because that's something that I wasn't able to kind of get at Pepsi. So that's where I went to Honeywell to get that like hardcore like software engineering experience. And then I went to Hypercare to get more software experience from the back end point of view. So at Honeywell, I was doing more front end, and then I went to Hypercare, I did back end as well.
Right. And what do you think was it that spurred the interest in engineering in the first place? What was it for you? Was it the culture at Waterloo, maybe anyone around you?
So it was a combination of factors. I initially wasn't considering engineering at all. But my brother was really pushing me to just even apply for engineering because um, at my school, though the professors, like though the teachers at my high school were really great, some of them were kind of discouraging me to pursue engineering and more to pursue like biology or something instead, like medical sciences. So I was more, most of my applications were focused in that area. But what really swayed me to choose engineering at Waterloo specifically was the co-op program, being able to kind of make money while I was going to school to pay off my tuition. And then the second main factor was the fact that like it was really open ended. So like even after engineering, I could still do whatever I wanted. Like I could still apply for med school. There have been instances of that happening. I could still, become a lawyer and such. Like it's just such an open ended field. So I chose that one because, in my opinion, I felt like I wasn't closing any doors, and I didn't have to make that like not life threatening, but like life changing decision in high school.
Hmm. Okay, so speaking of life-changing decisions, what? So how did you decide to pursue a master's then? Like the next step of your academic career was
Hmm.
pursuing master's.
Right. So what really motivated me to choose a master's was one, I wanted to do so. I was splitting back and forth on the decision in most of my undergrad, and even in my last term of undergrad, I was still debating if I wanted to do a master's. But what really motivated me to kind of continue and pursue a master's was the topic that I was doing. So a lot of people, when I was deciding, gave me the advice that your master's is kind of like a golden ticket. It's kind of like that like the Charlie's chocolate. Like what is it called? It's called a golden ticket, right? Or the
Yeah, 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 yeah.
one. Anyways, they're saying it's basically that, right? It's a chance for you to switch careers if you want it. It's a chance for you to explore a different domain, completely try something in a different faculty, for example. And one of the things that I really wanted to do, I think, throughout my entire career and up to this point was do cancer research. So the master's choice that I had to do cancer research was what really motivated me to pursue a master's. Sorry about that. Like, something just popped up on my laptop and it all turned black. So I was just a little concerned. But we're back. Yes.
What I want to know is you decided to pursue a master's. Was that before or after you did your first data science co-op, which was at Capital One, according to LinkedIn, correct? Was that before or after? What was the timeline like for, because your master's is obviously, actually, why don't you touch on what your master's is actually doing first as well, so we can get that context and then kind of see how that fits in the timeline.
Sure. Okay. So for my master's, I'm doing a research-based master's. Mainly focused on leveraging it's focused on designing and evaluating different deep learning architectures to better detect and improve breast cancer clinical tasks, such as predicting the response of a patient after a specific type of treatment or classifying which severity of cancer that they have based off of their MRI. And I guess what really kind of throughout my undergrad motivated me to pursue this master's was on top of the master's itself, it's a research program that I chose. And early on in my undergrad career, there were scholarships to allow students to pursue research in general, just like exploring different type of research fields. And after trying a few of them, I figured out that like I kind of like doing research, but the type of research I was conducting, I really wanted to be passionate about. And that's specifically why I chose this topic for my master's and why I continued and actually decided to continue with this master's as well.
So that's some really good context. Did you do the Capital One internship before or after you decided to pursue a master's? I'm curious what piqued the interest in data science and how that happened for you, because I know a lot of people who are struggling with this decision themselves. They maybe have various experiences themselves in engineering, maybe even accounting. I don't think I've met another one else quite like you who has started in accounting, so that's very unique to you. But yeah, anyway, so I'm curious, what was the transition like from like data science co-op to masters?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I think really throughout my career, when I started off as an accountant, I really liked the data side of things.
Hmm.
And then I was actually doing a lot of like Visual Basic coding during my internships. And then I found I kind of actually like the coding. So I tried out the software engineering side because wasn't sure if I really like the coding part of my co-op at Pepsi or if it was more the data analysis or whatever. And then when I was doing my software engineering internships, I found out that like yes, I do like the coding, but I miss the data side. Like I want to be able to combine both of them, and that's when I started applying for more data science focused roles in my latter co-op terms. And then when I worked at Capital One, I was like, yes, this is something that I really like to do. Like I was able to get the best of both worlds in terms of playing around with data, but also like having the ability and like being able to code in general on a day-to-day basis. And that's what motivated me to continue at Microsoft as well and apply for those roles. Specifically for, I think, my master's, I didn't make that decision until my last term. And essentially, I did like you have to apply earlier. And the reason why I applied was similar to what I did for high school. I didn't want to close any doors too soon. So my thought process was I could always apply, and then after I get in and after I get like my offers, I can then make a more informed decision about what I want to do versus if maybe like 4 months later, I'm like, oh, actually, I want to do a master's, but because I didn't apply, I wouldn't have that opportunity anymore. So that I wanted to just keep as many doors open as I could before I made a decision.
Thanks for sharing so much in detail. I think that this advice could go for a lot of people. I think keeping your doors open is generally a good policy to try to approximate. I wanted to know a little bit also as well about how has networking played a part in any of your roles? Did you network for any of your co-ops? Did you network to get into your masters? Like where does networking fit into your career journey?
So networking was very helpful for my master's in terms of deciding what master's I wanted to do. In the past, I did. I guess I put okay. So sorry, taking a step back. Networking in its general form is just like talking to people, right? Through LinkedIn or through coffee chats. And I did quite a bit of that, I think, in my second, third, and fourth term, especially when I was trying to make my decision. And it did help because I was able to listen to a variety of perspectives and see kind of what opportunities are out there, potentially different things I didn't know about. So specifically for my current master's topic, I didn't know that was actually a topic I could do in my master's. And it was through talking to one of my favorite professors in undergrad where I learned out that there was another professor at a different faculty, sorry, not faculty, but the different engineering stream that was working on this and to reach out to them. So it's kind of very important, I would say, in terms of learning about what exists. In terms of specific opportunities, some of them didn't come from networking. Like a lot of my internships weren't from networking. They were just from Waterloo Works applying to like 50 jobs or 100 jobs. But some of the other ones, they did kind of derive from some sort of networking in terms of being able to understand. So like before I joined the VIP Lab, I did talk to students who were at the VIP Lab. So I knew what the culture was kind of like. And when I was joining Microsoft, I also talked to some people who worked at Microsoft before, so I could kind of see if it was a good fit for me as well.
Makes perfect sense. So what I'm hearing is the majority of your networking experience was beneficial in an information gathering sense, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Because I'm hoping that now that I'm sitting down with someone as accomplished as you, the people who I speak to will take this advice from you because I think a lot of people, I've networked with a lot of people who are just straight up asking for jobs, and that's
Mhm.
just not really the right way to go about it all the time. Like you should gather information first. Like why do you want this job, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to ask yourself those deep questions
Right.
before that. So thanks for kind of giving me some credence there, or like supporting my hypothesis. Let's move on to your experience in your master's. This one's a pretty good question because I have a lot of people that I've spoken to who like express this apprehension about pursuing a master's. What would you say to someone who is interested in master's but has no research experience? They've never really done any research, but they're interested in learning more about it, but there's not a whole lot of time in undergrad, or maybe they just didn't get any opportunities in undergrad to pursue it.
I would say try to reach out to a lab if possible. It really depends on what stage, I guess, the individual is. If the individual is still in undergrad or maybe it's their last term of undergrad, like still try and reach out to professors or potential labs that you're interested in just to learn more about different topics because signing up for a master's is a commitment. It's not
Mhm.
as much of a commitment as like a PhD, but it's still like a 1 to 2 year commitment that you're
Mhm.
signing up for. So you want to make sure it's something that works right for you. And there's also a large opportunity cost that comes with pursuing grad school in the sense that a lot of your peers will be out making like money where you're still kind of making money, but you're not making that much money in comparison. So there are a lot of times where people, especially like that I've experienced, where they start doubting like, why am I doing this? And it's really integral to have that solid foundation of this is the reason why I'm pursuing my master's and to go into it with some kind of foresight so you're not completely thrown off about what research is
Mhm.
because it's very different than I would say taking like undergrad courses unless you're doing like a course-based master's, but if you're doing a research-based master's, research is very different than doing undergrad.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the distinction is very important to make because course-based masters, if you're interested in that, you kind of know what you're getting into because it's more courses, just harder, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a different vibe for sure, but it's you have an idea. Now, what
Yeah.
about someone who's like very interested in a research question or something, but they don't know where to start because they don't really know they've never met anyone or they have never had any exposure to any researchy courses or research people who are doing research. So they've never had this kind of experience, but they're interested in studying something. Like perhaps for example, I'll give a concrete example. Someone who is interested in studying like black holes or something, something like that. They're interested in research, but they don't really know what goes on in there. Are there any resources that they can learn what research is really like day to day? That's the very succinct way to put it.
Well, the typical research flow is let's say you do have a question about a specific topic, like black holes.
Mhm.
And let's say you have no idea what they are. Well, I mean, in theory, you should know what black holes are if you have a research question about it. But let's say you don't know. Normally, what the first step is just to information gathering, right? So you
Mhm.
go on Google Scholar, or you just type in that question in Google and kind of see what pops up. Normally in academia, what the search starts with is you may start with like a Google search, but then you start fine tuning that to more Google Scholar searches. So you're looking at more papers to understand, different areas that people are exploring, different kinds of advances in research. And though a lot of research papers are very intimidating because they're like a lot of words, some of them are not very understandable, at least in the first kind of review. It's a good starting point just to see, who's working in the field, what kind of research is going on, and then potentially if there's anyone in your school that's like a professor or any students that are working on that area, trying to like reach out and connect them to understand, what are they doing and what kind of advice do they have for understanding more about that field. Because, for example, LLM research, there's a lot more resources from like a specific type of website versus if you're doing something like more physics related, they might have specific conferences and like websites with more information that you could go deeper into. So it's kind of like a breadth first versus depth first search, right? Being able to kind of reach out and then learn about the different fields and continuing down the path that you're like more interested or more curious about. But what I normally encourage people to do is, as a first starting point, just searching up in Google or searching up in Google Scholar. And if you're at a university or if you're nearby a university, just Googling kind of that university plus the topic's name just to see who's working on that.
That was really well put. Thanks, Amy. I like that answer a lot. I think that a lot of people would save a lot of time for themselves, even, and for other people, if they kind of went through that flow that you described first and deepened their own knowledge before talking to others. I've even experienced that myself. I think that it's best to do a lot of research and then network with people and continue your information gathering. I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about your research. I was wondering because this is one of the ways that you and I met. We like early on in us having met, we worked together with Nutritionverse, as in I was
Right.
gathering data rather with iPhones, which
Yeah.
was actually kind of cool to me because I was like, damn, this is so accessible now. Like you can actually do your own data gathering on for any project or whatever it is you're interested in with an iPhone, and that's totally valid. So that was reassuring. But yeah, I was wondering if you could summarize Nutritionverse for our audience here.
Sure. So Nutritionverse is an open source initiative. People can find the data and the code online that tries to estimate dietary intake from a simple picture of the food. And the motivation for it was initially because of the aging population and the shifts in patterns due to COVID and other epidemics, that people were now trying to age at home rather than going to senior homes. So it was a more accessible way for individuals to track their nutritional intake. And it was focused more on not just calories, but all the different aspects of nutrition, right? Like protein, calcium, etc.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Any plans to commercialize it?
At the moment, we're more focused on trying to advance the research as much as possible. We've been working with dietitians on different ways and different measurements that we should be tracking. I know that there are some universities that are looking at commercializing it or have already commercialized it, but at the moment, the main reason why we're trying to keep it as open source as possible is because we're focused on accelerating advancements at the moment versus trying to gain as much profit as possible.
Yeah, that sounds great as a general fan of open source initiatives, hence the shirt. Um,
Yes.
yeah, that's awesome. Let's jump into another project that we can kind of cover at a high level is the food fusion. Would you be able to discuss a little bit about food fusion?
Food fusion?
Yeah, food fusion.
So the generative AI aspect that leverages. So okay, so that one it's part of our Gen AI for Good initiative, and it essentially tries to leverage generative AI technologies to augment our data sets. So that way, we're especially if you might know this if you've played around with machine learning models in general, it's only as good as the data, and the more data you have, the better the model is typically. So we're trying to use generative AI to gather different types of data that we might have missed in our initial connection, or just to even speed up the collection, right? So instead of requiring a long time to collect 100 images manually, maybe we can get it in like 5 minutes through generative AI. So Food Fusion was our attempts to kind of leverage that for the Nutrition Verse project as well.
Yeah, and it's a trend that I've seen growing in a lot of academic papers is to like that people are generally becoming more favorable about the
Mm-hmm.
notion of using synthetic data. Is that
Right.
generally a trend you're seeing as well in your
Yeah.
space specifically?
So one of the reasons why there has been a big shift in leveraging synthetic data is one, gathering real data sometimes is infeasible or really difficult. So this is especially true for healthcare data because there's not that much available open source. The other main reason is because there has been advancements and research showing that using synthetic data actually benefits your model and its performance on real data sets. So on top of, improving the model on just being able to do its task, it's actually able to transfer that knowledge towards the real setting as well. So that's why there has been a big push in trying to use synthetic data to augment model performance.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm sure some of our audience will find this area potentially super interesting. Maybe it'll be a booming field of research for someone to really dive
Yeah.
deep into at some point in the future. So I had down I wanted to ask about your most fulfilling research, but I think that we know a little bit about that. But maybe you can touch a little bit about your thesis and like by the way, what's your deadline? Are you graduating soon or because you did say you were just working on your thesis, so bringing it back to real life, how's
But
that?
bringing it back to real life, yes. My current goal is to graduate this term, which is ending like April 2024. My thesis is due like this like Monday, basically, like this coming week. Um,
And you still met with me. My goodness.
Sometimes we gotta prioritize. um, and I felt bad pushing this as far as I did.
Oh no. Oh my goodness. Now I feel bad. And it's St.
No,
Patrick's Day too. You're missing like two things, really.
all good. I mean, I wasn't really gonna go out for St. Patrick's Day. I have a thesis deadline, but besides
It's a
the
good
point.
reason.
So that is my current deadline. Bring it back to real world. I am trying to graduate April 2024. My thesis is on my breast cancer work. So one of the one of the kind of areas that we're studying is using a new MRI modality called synthetic correlated diffusion imaging, and it was shown to be very promising for prostate cancer, but it wasn't really applied for breast cancer. So part of my thesis is leveraging that and tailoring it for breast cancer specifically, and then optimizing the parameters used to compute this new MRI modality for our breast cancer task so that we can improve prediction performance of how patients recover after a treatment, and also how the classification for performance of being able to discern how severe their cancer is, because these are really important clinical tasks that are required in the breast cancer treatment pathway for patients. But right now, most of them is based on subjective human evaluation and also requires a lot of time on the pathologist side as well.
Wow, that's super interesting. I'm wondering, I hope it's not too technical for I guess the purposes of our convo today. But could you talk just a little bit about the methodology that has been applied to prostate but not breast cancer yet? I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, synthetic something.
Right. So synthetic. Okay. So it's called synthetic correlated diffusion imaging. Breaking it down, um, for an MRI, if you can imagine, MRIs they have different scanner configurations, right? So an MRI is a machine used to collect an image of the patient. You can configure it differently to have different kind of they're called B values, which represent like the gradient strength. Now, B values are higher, take a longer time to kind of generate, but on top of that, each B value you compute also requires a long time. So practically, pathologists normally collect maybe like 2 or 3 B values per patient, and then those result in 2 or 3 different MRIs. Synthetic correlated diffusion imaging is an attempt to, on top of having these real B values, we try and extract the synthetic signals if we got, the MRI for the B value in between these two that we were extracted, for example. So let's say the pathologist collected, or the clinician collected like 0, 50, and 1,000 for the B values for the patient. We try and look at what would have been the performance for 100 or 200, and we combine those signals to get a new signal, which is the synthetic correlated diffusion imaging, which is able to amplify certain signals, especially like different tumor regions, more intensely than just having the original three B values.
That's super interesting. And so you're generating these, as the name implies, with a diffusion model, correct?
No, it's through a mathematical form. So this technique came out before diffusion models existed. It's more mathematically comprehensive in terms of being able to interpolate those signals and then also combine them. There's the whole math equation in the Nature journal that they published for prostate. What wasn't done was we didn't try and attempt this for breast cancer because for breast cancer, there's different B values that are normally collected. And on top of that, the signals are different. So for prostate, there's more, I would say, in my opinion, more noise because for a prostate MRI, it doesn't only show the prostate. Most of the time, it shows the bladder and other regions.
Hmm.
Whereas the breast is normally just the breast, but maybe some tissue or some bone around the area.
Right.
So it was trying to leverage that and also tailor it and then optimize it for breast cancer.
That's super interesting. Okay, so you get 0, 50, and 1,000, as you suggested. Let's say that they collected those B values. You generate 100 and 500 to add to their collection of data, basically.
Mhm.
How much time savings might this like bring or like what, sorry, I'm trying to connect it back to real world again. Real world, right? Well,
Right.
actually, real world is already super connected because you're classifying things as like as the severity, right? So it's super connected. But what I mean is also, does this would your methodology save time on the amount of time it takes to complete the MRI scan? Would it then allow for more patient throughput? Like how does that connect?
So at the moment, MRI, like we would still need the MRI to be collected because we still need
Mhm.
those raw signals. What it does save in terms of time, it's also, sorry, so the main thing that it saves is it helps to improve the performance of these tasks. So we
Mhm.
analyze, what have we just predicted the patient's response to a specific type of treatment using the original MRI, using like a T2 weighted image, using something like a diffusion weighted image instead. And we found that this approach was able to produce superior results of like over like 10% in accuracy. And it doesn't actually add any more time to the whole process because those signals are based off of signals that are already normally collected. Like they're based off of MRI images that are typically collected in the process. So it enhances the performance, I would say. Like you
Right.
still need to collect the raw MRI images, but you can get better performance using this technique.
Okay. Yeah, and that's obviously super valuable, so that's
Hmm.
that's that's great. Um, Thank you for going. I think it was actually great that your thesis deadline was tomorrow because I can tell this is very fresh in your brain right now.
Yes, it
Right?
is very
So
right.
so that makes for good conversation. So thank you for carving out the time. How do you stay up to date with all the Gen AI stuff? I guess you have to work with your research scientists, so they might that might be a way for you. But really any research because you as a master student are
Mhm.
very up to date with your imaging, your signal study, your signal processing research, your medical research. You're very up to date on those. And then in the workplace, I imagine that you are slightly focused on perhaps a little bit of a different area. How do you stay up to date with all of these crazy things going on at the same time?
It is very challenging, especially in this age and world where like there's basically papers being published on like any subject, like really frequently, really daily. One of the major ways to stay up to date, and that I normally advise people to do, is to surround yourself with people who are kind of like-minded or in the same career path, because you can only read so many research papers, right? But you can listen to more summaries of research papers. And it does work for a good discussion with your peers. So that's one of the ways I stay up to date is through talking to other grad students, my supervisor, and this also holds for when I'm at Microsoft, like my teammates or my manager. They also know a lot of what's going on, and then they can share those insights. And it's a good way for me to kind of catch up to date as well on things I might have missed when I was looking at like archive or like daily newsletters.
Yeah, yeah, that's such good advice. I think finding the right people that you spend your day with is really valuable. Let's jump into some because we're running closer to time. Let's jump into some what I call personal tips for navigating the workplace.
Okay.
So, do you have any tips, first of all, because you're such a busy person, managing your time with masters and full time? And also, if you could offer any advice to anyone who's considering pursuing a master's and a full-time job at the same time, that would be valuable as well. Um, yeah.
Sure. So I would say it's not unfathomable. When I was starting off, a lot of people were kind of discouraging me from doing that, or just saying that, like, it might be very, very stressful and so forth. What did help was I talked to a few people on LinkedIn who were actually able to juggle both. So it is possible. People have done it before. It is a little bit stressful, but it is manageable. And the way that I kind of segment it out is, in order to do a master's and full-time work, the main factor is how great your company is. Like, my team at Microsoft is amazing. Microsoft has an amazing work-life balance. So I'm able to kind of turn off my brain after I finish my work day and then focus solely on my master's. Put in that like 8 hour a day, and then I can work on my grad school outside of that. Versus, actually, I'll just stop it at that. And that has helped me being able to manage my time better, right? Because I'm able to then detach and then work on my grad school. So I would say that's one main factor. The other thing is just organization and being able to plan things out. So it's true for undergrad, and I think it's true for anyone in general, just being able to kind of prioritize things and decide when something needs to be done, or if you have like a heavy week for one of the weeks, being able to communicate that in advance to people who are affected, like your managers or your supervisors and so forth.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And so the main thing I'm hearing too is besides basic organizational skills that one should ideally develop in undergrad and maybe even just through your career and having family and things like that. It's also your context. So having uh, finding the right team in order to accomplish both tasks is crucial. Because
Yeah,
I
like
can,
finding people who are understanding, amazing managers. And I think this applies for anything in general. Like, even if you're not doing both at the same time, you would ideally want, excuse me, to be in a work setting where your manager is very supportive of you, is very understanding.
yeah, yeah, for sure. That makes perfect sense. Um, what is the best advice you've received in your career?
Oh,
If anything doesn't come to mind, that's totally valid too, you know. But
oh,
if
there's
it,
like a lot that comes to mind, but I'm trying
ah,
to think of like one, so I don't like spend 10 minutes talking. And then actually, I think as I do these interviews or podcasts or panel sessions, sometimes the best advice changes depending on my day and what recently happened. But
absolutely, yeah,
I would say one of the biggest advice that was given to me was to always learn or find something you can learn about an experience. So if you put on a project that you don't really like, but you're like, oh, well, I have to do it, or so forth. So just trying to find something that will benefit you from the experience. And if you really can't find anything that you can learn from it, maybe stepping back and thinking about why you're doing this in the first place, and maybe is there a different place that could offer that like whatever you're seeking in a more effective manner. So I think that was like the best advice that was given to me, and I think it was given to me like in my first term of my co-op by one of like my favorite managers ever. And he was just kind of like, make sure that whatever you're doing, you know what you're doing, but at the same time, if you're given a lemon, like try and find some way to use the lemon. And if you really, really, really hate lemon and you can't find a way to use the lemon, like find a different path. Like try something else.
yeah. I if you really can't find a way to use a lemon, I mean, just throw it away, I think, and
Yeah,
just
I
look
mean,
for
like,
a
you
new lemon.
do something else exactly.
Look for a lime. I don't know, whatever. Let's jump into some rapid fire questions. So pineapple on pizza.
That's good.
That's good. Okay. If data science were a superhero, what power would it have?
Iron Man power, basically.
Iron Man. Okay. So
Like,
no superpower, really.
he like kind of like analyzes things and then he like makes targeted actions. I guess like high accuracy maybe. Or I don't know. Like ability to like take a lot of information and then distill it down really quickly. I don't
Oh,
know
for
what that's
sure.
called. I know it's a superpower. I just don't know what it's called.
Is there a word for that? It makes perfect sense. You know, I'm sure Jarvis is definitely an LLM, and I'm sure that he has some nerf components that help him like render the vision before sending missiles and stuff, you know. Uh,
Exactly.
so do you have any unusual talents most people don't know about?
The unusual talent I normally go with is just being able to write the alphabet with both hands.
Damn. Okay. Are you ambidextrous in general, or is that just like the one thing you practiced?
I think it was something that I could practice. I don't know if I am ambidextrous in general, but it was something that I practiced in high school, so I just kind of carried it throughout.
Nice. Okay, if you were a vegetable, which vegetable would you be?
Oh God, I don't know. Carrot?
Carrot? Okay,
I don't know.
why though?
I just like carrots. It was the first thing that popped in my head.
That wraps up our rapid fire questions. Thanks for the shenanigans. Um, Believe it or not, that is all the questions that I had written down for today. But yeah, let me just say thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me, taking the time to impart your wisdom. I really hope that I personally extracted value out of this, and I really hope that everyone else who does happen to watch this does as well. So yeah, thank you so much. And is there anything else that you would like to add to this? If you
Yeah.
have anything you want to plug, if you have any favorite podcasts or so, any books you've been listening to, anything like that, actually, that would be interesting.
My thesis, other people's thesis. That is basically my surrounding for the past few weeks.
Oh, oh, poor
But
Amy,
I guess
man.
like okay, I guess one thing is in your quest to find what you're interested in or what you're learning about. I know I said this before in terms of trying not to close any doors. But at the same time, try and explore as much as you can. If you're a student, try and go to as many different conferences as you can, like that you can theoretically do with balancing school. But sometimes going to, like the Climate Con or Velocity or something will help you figure out things or make you discover a new topic that you might actually be really, really passionate about, but you never even knew because you just never came up in your path. So I would say if there's any opportunity to really expand your learning or expand your scope, don't be afraid to just go out there and explore. Even if you feel like you don't know anything or you have no context, like it's always good to just learn a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. I think I've had some really productive discussions where I'm
Mm-hmm.
meeting someone who I know nothing about their world at all. But if you approach that conversation with, "Hey, I know nothing about your world, but I'm interested,"
Yeah.
they'll almost always meet you with like a certain level of like fostering your curiosity
Mm-hmm.
and maybe dumbing down what they have to say into something more palatable for you. Like if they don't do that, they're bad conversationalists, and you don't want to talk to them anyway. So, in my personal opinion. But yeah,
Sure.
okay. Once again, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for having me again, Anthony, and I hope the rest of your day goes well.